as we get more and more into QuickBooks, we go over everything, and I know for me anyway, it's like, okay, I hear it, it makes sense, and when I go to do it, I forget parts of it, or, you know, I have questions, go back and look at the recordings. So today we're going to get started. We're going to talk about Chapter 2, and we're going to look at the goals and objectives like we always do and go through all of those. Like I said last week, Chapter 2 is the beginning of really getting into QuickBooks. And the first thing we start out in QuickBooks, we start out with vendors. And first question, what is a vendor?
A person you do business with.
Right, right, good answer. Someone said someone that you paid money. Correct, correct. A vendor is somebody or a company that you purchase goods from. Think for a minute, do you have vendors in your personal life, your personal finance? What would be an example of a vendor in your personal financial life? Hairdresser, yes.
Grocery stores.
Grocery stores. Tax accountant, yes. I was thinking of, like, I have Verizon, my cell phone bill is one that you're going to pay money to. Sony EMC, yeah, your utilities. You know, any of those. So we all have vendors, and of course businesses have vendors. And so what we're going to look at now is how this business, Christina Reyna Designs, how she manages her vendors using QuickBooks. Because you think about it, you go out and you buy something. We don't usually buy on account like a business might, but we go out and we buy something. Maybe we use a credit card, and so we have the receipt. We stick it somewhere waiting for the credit card bill to come in, or we pay cash, or you know, we want to keep a record. And in business, of course, it's so important to keep a record of who we're paying and what our bills are. So this is what we're going to discuss today. If you looking here, the first goal is to find the system default accounts for vendors. Now, all of you have taken some accounting, so you have to reach back into like your first accounting course. And when you buy something, if you were doing it manually, you would debit cash and you credit accounts payable. When you pay for that, when you get the bill at some time in the future, you debit accounts payable and credit cash. And this is what they're talking about as the system's default. So QuickBooks, when you don't have to know, again, we go back to last week where we talked about how QuickBooks is for non-accountants. You don't have to know that that's the accounting entry that QuickBooks is doing. But when you enter a bill, it's doing that accounting entry. It's debiting the expense account or maybe an asset account. Say you purchased a desk or a car or some asset for your business, and crediting accounts payable. When you pay the bill, usually in businesses, you'd make a purchase and then you pay the bill in 30 days or in 10 days or whatever the payment terms are. When you pay the bill, QuickBooks automatically debits accounts payable and credits cash. So any questions about that? Okay, I see a lot of no's. Great. Okay, so there's two ways that you might purchase something. We talked about purchasing on account. And you also may have cash purchases. And it's not really cash like with cash dollars. It would be if you're writing a check, if you're using PayPal or a debit card. If you're purchasing something where you're not purchasing and then paying at a later point, if you're paying at the same time. So QuickBook also has the functions to do that as well. And we're going to get into that. And I try to think of an example of the two different kind of purchase transactions. And what I came up with, for me personally, you know, I go to that racetrack that's outside the Hall campus. And when I buy gas at that racetrack, I use my credit card. So that would be an example of I'm making a purchase. I'm not paying for it right now. I'm going to pay for it when I get the bill, when the bill is due. Then I walk into racetrack, and I'm a snacker, I have to admit. So I buy something to drink, I buy some snacks, that kind of thing, and I pay with cash, or I pay with my debit card. So that would be the other type of transaction that can happen. Another example of what I'm saying is the cash transaction, although it's not really cash, is my mortgage for my house. It comes out of my bank account every month. I don't write a check. I don't get a bill. I don't get anything. It just comes out once a month. And that would be the type of it, what we would say a cash transaction, although there's really no cash involved. So any questions about those types of transactions and the difference between the two of them? The other goals, let's go over them really quick. The other goals today are really going to be in QuickBooks. And we're going to go into QuickBooks now and look at these, and then we're going to come back to Blackboard at the end to discuss the assignments, because this is the first week that you'll have an assignment that you'll turn in to me for grading. Okay? So let's go over these goals in QuickBooks. We're going to learn all about vendors. The task today is vendors. The first thing is update the vendor center. We're recording purchases on account in the Enter Bills window. We're going to process the credit memo in the Enter Bills window. We're going to record the payments on accounts in the Pay Bills window, and record cash payments in the Write Checks window, and display and print vendor-related reports. Somebody asked, do we have any Cirrus assignments this week? You do. There's a quiz, and we're going to talk more about Cirrus and checking your assignments and so forth towards the end of the class. Okay, so let's go into QuickBooks. Okay, everybody can see my QuickBooks window, I hope.
Yes.
Yes, okay, good, because I can't see you when I'm in QuickBooks. So my QuickBooks is open to this vendor information page because I've been working in QuickBooks prior to the class. So when you get started, if you remember from last week, you're going to go into File. You're going to see the new company, No Company screen. You'll go into File, Open Restore Company, Open a Company, and then it's going to take you to your files to open the Christina Reyna designs. So here it's going to open, and you would open this Chapter 2 Christina Reyna designs. Well, we've already done that, so we don't have to do that. So we're going to cancel. And we're in the No Company screen. And I'm going to open the next step once you've opened your company. And this may take a few minutes. My computer's being pretty slow today. Sometimes my internet's a little pokey, but when you open up, you'll always see the password. For everybody, the password is student1 with a capital S. I'm going to go into vendors. Okay. And I didn't do this on purpose, but this is really a good example for everybody. What I did, if you look up here, when I opened my company, I opened EX1, Chapter 1, not Chapter 2. So my vendors, when you open Chapter 2, the file, the vendors are already populated. It's obviously not here. So I'm going to have to go in and open a company. And I'm going to cancel and make sure that I go into Chapter 2, Christina Reyna Designs. And again, going through and adding the password of student 1. So you see the difference here. Like I said, I didn't mean to do it on purpose, but it just shows you if you do run into that and it doesn't look right, make sure you check that you're in the right chapter's files. Once you've opened the file, yours will only say Christina Reyna Interior Designs, Chapter 2. You want to make sure you put your name into it, and we talked about this last week. You go into Company, My Company, and then the Edit, and edit the name. So make sure you put your name on there, because otherwise I won't know that it's your work. Okay, now we're where we need to be. The first thing we're going to talk about in vendors, here's the vendor, the tab where you work in vendors. There's the vendor center, which is what we're in now. There's enter bills, which is pretty much self-explanatory, where you're going to enter your bills.
Ms. Murphy,
yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we do the backup or the restore before we start doing the work or after we do?
Great question. You don't need to do it.
We don't need to do it?
You don't need to do it.
Okay.
Because you're going to save your files, you should be okay. You don't need to do it.
Okay.
That's a great question. I skipped over that in my notes when we were talking. Since I did the wrong chapter, I skipped over that in my notes. Open your file, change your company name, and then move forward. Thank you for asking that question. So no backup and restore. Okay, so looking in the vendor center, enter bills, self-explanatory, and pay bills. And those are the two functions we're going to use right now. You know, of course, as we know this time of year, 1099s and so forth, but we don't need to do any of that now. So now we're in the vendor center. If you look at table 2-1 on page 34, it'll talk about all of the different parts of the vendor file. And if you want to, as we have a new company, your first task in this new company is that Christina Reyna hired your accounting service to do their QuickBooks for her. So we're going to go in here into new vendor and add a new vendor. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to go in and put the vendor name, the company name, your name, or if it's a different company, your contact at that company, phone number, email, so forth. The address detail, and you fill all of that in. The next thing that you're going to do, after you've filled in all the information, and as you go through QuickBooks in the text, they will be giving you all this information to enter in these screens. Then you want to go into payment setting. The account number, if they have a credit limit, or if you have a credit limit with them, payment terms, and generally it's going to be net 10 days or net 30 days, but maybe you'll have some vendor that it's a different term, and so forth. So you fill all that out. The next thing you do is the account setting. And this, you want to know what account, what is this? In this case, the first one that you're going to be setting up is your accounting service. So if you look down here, scroll down, you're going to look here, accounting expense, account 6020. So you'll put that in there. So forth. So any questions about setting up a new account? And then once you set it up, and here's the first one, my accounting service, of course yours will have your name. It'll appear over here in the list of vendors. And all of the detail information will be here. If there was transactions, obviously they would be down here. Any questions about opening a new vendor? And you know, I can't see the chat while I'm in the screen, so if you could just ask the questions. Okay, so sometimes you would have to delete a vendor. And why do you think that we delete vendors at times?
Because you're no longer working with that company. They may have gone out of business, or you've changed a new vendor, or...
Correct. Absolutely right. They could have gone out of business. You know, you don't use that product anymore, whatever it might be. Two of the things in QuickBooks and in any accounting, you cannot delete a vendor if there's a balance, or if you've done business with them in this accounting year, in this fiscal year. And why do you think that would be?
For tax purposes?
For tax purposes.
Right, for tax purposes, to maintain your audit trail, to maintain your records so you see what's going on. So if you try to delete a vendor, that's what's going to happen. But Christina Reyna wants us to delete Lakes Advertising because they went out of business. So of course, and you see they have a zero balance. So we're good. We can go ahead and delete them. So we click on Lakes Advertising. We go to the main menu, not the vendor. This is the vendor menu, this line. But we're going up here to the main menu to edit, delete vendor. Of course, it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to delete this vendor? And we say, okay. And you'll see now no more, it's not in the vendor list. And obviously you don't have the information on that. Any questions? Another thing you may want to do with a vendor is edit the vendor. Here's the edit. Here's the information here. Maybe they have a different phone number. Maybe your contact person changed. Again, you can go in and click on there. Or maybe their address changed. And again, you will go in, make any corrections you need to make. Pretty straightforward.
Ms. Murphy, I understand that this is an action that's teaching us how to delete a vendor. Isn't it better just to make them inactive in an accounting system than it is to delete them?
Generally, I would say yes. I would agree with you. I would think you could delete them if you just were cleaning up your accounts and it's an old vendor that you haven't used and they're out of business. I think in that case it would be okay to delete them, but I do agree with you that in just generally, if you found that they're still in business and you just haven't used them for the last couple of years, you could go ahead and make them inactive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so the next thing that we...
Is our
Yes.
vendors list supposed to be exactly like your vendor list?
It will be, yes. When you open the chapter, obviously I put in my accounting service.
Well,
When you add that new vendor, it'll be yours.
my Minneapolis electric and gas doesn't have a 350 balance. So I don't know.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I see what you're saying now. No, we're going to go to that. That's my example of entering a bill.
Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you so much. I try to do one example in each of what we're going to talk about, so you kind of have an idea. In the book, if you've read through chapter 2, you'll see that you'll do these same exercises, and then they'll give you 4 or 5 more vendors to add as practice exercise, and 3 or 4 how many bills to add to practice. So you're building up Christina Reyna's accounting records. I only did kind of one of each thing. So, you know, just to give you an idea of it, but yours will look, it'll be completed. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Oh, okay, you're welcome. Okay, so we want to go ahead and we want to enter bills. We go up to the vendor up here, enter bills. And I'm going over, if you're following in the book, I'm going over to page 44, and I'm going into to enter a bill. And I would go in here, and you could see you would pull down the vendor that you're going to pay. In this case, we're going to pay Minneapolis Gas and Electric. And it comes up, it has its address, it has all of the information in there. You're going to put in the date of the bill, the due date, and the amount due, the terms, and so forth. Over here, you're going to the drop-down menu of what account it is. This particular one is utilities, but whatever, and it'll tell you in the book what the account number is. But you know, if you were doing this in your, in your work, you would know what all these vendors and so forth are. Oops, sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. So you would go through and enter it, and you see over here, and you saw it in the vendor listing that the bill was $350, and here it is. Now, this is great. This is a really good function of QuickBooks. If you're entering bills, and if you can visualize yourself in an office, I could visualize you're sitting in front of your computer with this whole stack of bills that you've received over the last however many days, and you're busy entering them all into QuickBooks, and you know, you got to a point, you've got a bill from a new vendor. So instead of having to go out of this enter bill screen and go back into the vendor center and set up the vendor like we did in the past, you can just go here on vendor and add new. And it'll take you to that screen in the vendor center that we looked at just a minute ago to add in all the vendor information, the payment, the account settings, etc. So that's, to me, a real time saver, because that's something in the practical sense you're gonna run into all the time, that you're gonna have new vendors. especially a company like Christina Reyna, where it's a new company, so you'll be buying from new people, and as we talked about just a few minutes ago, vendors change. They go out of business, they move, you don't use their products, so you'll be using new vendors all the time. Any questions about that?
I have a question.
Sure.
In the book on step 9, it says to click the expenses tab. I can't see the expenses.
Here, you just click.
Hold on.
Can you see where my cursor is?
Oh, okay.
And then that'll give you the drop-down menu.
Oh, okay, there we go.
So you're actually clicking down here. It's a little bit of you think you should click up here, but you click down here.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I tried
Under
to
the word account.
expenses and nothing happened. And I'm like, maybe there's something else. Okay, thank you.
Right, exactly. Any question? I have found the questions that you're asking, I've done the same thing. So that's how I know. If you've made an error, as we all do, on page 46, there's the steps to go through to correct any errors that you might have made on a bill or entering a number or so forth. Another thing that we can do on the enter bill window is credits. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I've taken things back a million times. And so this is what this is for. You purchase something, you as your company, Christina Reyna, purchased something and it wasn't what she wanted, so she's taken it back and she wants a credit. Again, you go into the enter bills. And see up here in this little corner here, it says bill or credit. So if you want to put in a credit memo, you've returned, you've gone, she bought something at Home Depot, it wasn't the right thing, she returned it, she has a credit memo now from Home Depot. And again, and I just said Home Depot because that's where I return things, but you would go down to your vendors, whoever it might be, and put in your vendor and the date, the amount, and so forth. And again, the account number of whatever the credit memo is. And the entry for this, now you don't need to know this as a person entering this, but as an accountant, you know that when you enter this credit memo, accounts payable is going to be debited and the expense account is going to be credited. So if you looked at T accounts or you looked at a balance, if you looked at a trial balance, you would see these things. Okay, pretty straightforward, I think. I think you'll go in and enter it. Again, you want to make sure you get the amounts right, and so forth. Terms of payment right. Now, okay, we've entered all the bills. Now it's time at the end of whatever period to pay the bills. And logically, we're going to go to the pay bills window. Again, more and more, as you work through QuickBooks, you can see the first premise is the non-accountant use of QuickBooks. And when QuickBooks pays bills, of course, internally, their debit accounts payable and credits cash. Now, on this pay bill window, we have show all bills. You could do due on or before a particular date. And that gets into one concept of cash management. This is a little out of the realm of QuickBooks, but if you're the accountant for a company, you want to manage cash that you're not paying the bills. You don't want to pay them late, But of course, you don't want to pay them too early. You want to keep the cash in house as long as you possibly can. So we've chosen to show all bills. And because I've only entered one bill, this is what's showing. You can filter by whatever vendor if you only want to pay a particular vendor. You can sort by due date. And so you'll see this. Now we want to pay the bill. Sorry about that. We want to pay the bill, and we'll put in the amount. Anyway, we want to pay the bill. We would go down here in the payment, the date, the check number. We assign the check number. I don't know why I'm getting this message. Okay. There. Sorry about that. I didn't have the filter by filled out. And here it's showing this is the bill we're going to pay. We're going to pay, here's the reference, net 30 days. We don't have any credit available, and so forth. We're going to assign a check number manually. We're not going to use, we're not going to just use whatever's printed on the check. Now, in QuickBooks, in the class, obviously you're not going to print any bills. And we're going to assign the check number on this, and we're going to call it check number 1. And here's the summary. We could hit done or pay more bills. If we hit done, then this particular invoice is queued to be paid. Okay, so now we've paid it. We've entered a bill. We've issued a credit. The other thing I wanted to show you on the pay bills window. Again, now I had only put in one invoice, so it's a little bit difficult to see here because there isn't any transaction since I paid the one bill we had. But if you're only going to pay a partial payment, once you have the amount up here, it'll say the amount due might be, in this case, it was $350, but you're only going to pay $100. You would enter it in over here in this final column of amount to pay. Another thing to look at in this pay bill window, here's your cash balance. It was $45,000 before we paid that bill. We paid a $350 bill. Now it's showing you $44,650. Real important, especially in a new company that's probably managing its cash very, very tightly. They want to watch how much cash is left after each bill is paid. Now, we talked way at the beginning of the class about 2 types of bills. We talked about the bill where you make a purchase and you're going to pay later, which is exactly what we've shown, what I've shown here in the pay bills window, in the enter bills window, and so forth. The other type is that you're going to just pay immediately. You're not going to run it through accounts payable. And there isn't a lot of those, but there may be some. You may be buying from a small vendor that you use PayPal and buy that way, or you use a debit card if you're a small company. I always go back to the example of my nonprofit. They bought a lot of tools and different supplies from very small vendors. So those vendors didn't send a bill at the end of the month. The big hardware stores did. But the small vendors, they had a credit card. So they paid the credit card. It was never really through accounts payable. And so in order to pay those types of things, and this is a hint, as you're doing in previous classes, this stumped a lot of students. As you're paying rent in QuickBooks, and this is QuickBooks 2020, so the last one I taught was QuickBooks 2018, which is the same, but I don't know if they've changed the problems. When you're paying rent, they pay rent as a non-accounts payable item. And I know that's hung up a lot of students in the past. So keep that in mind. So check when you're paying rent, check to make sure that how they're telling you to pay it. Okay, so those kind of things, those kind of purchases, we use the write checks window. And it probably won't let us because we don't have anything out there that I'm paying. And you're going to do it within this pay bills window. It's going to give you all of the information that you need. Because I don't have anything to pay, the window's not here. I'm sorry, I just went the wrong way. It's in banking. Totally threw me for a minute. Sorry about that. But this is where you'll go. And let me do it again because I think I confused you. I was looking at the wrong part of my notes. So instead of going into vendors, you go into banking, write checks. Everybody got that? Sorry, it was confusing.
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks. So you'll go in, it's going right out of cash, and pay to the order of, it could be one of these vendors or a new vendor, their address, the memo item, what you're paying, what you're buying, the date, and the amount. Just like you would write a check normally. And then save and new at the end. Any questions about those? Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is reporting. And I don't know if you remember from last week or even the week before talking about the functionality of QuickBooks. One was activities, which is what we're talking about now, entering bills, paying bills, so forth, writing checks. The other functionality is reporting. So now you've done all of these things. So there's reports for each type of transaction. Vendors, you're going to have unpaid bill report, a vendor listing. It doesn't even have to be a numeric report. Think of in terms of a lot of reporting. It's not only numeric reports, it's listing of vendors or customers or whatever. And especially in payables, you'd want to know, you as a manager would want to know, what bills do I have coming up? What's going to be due? So forth. You'd want to see the balance of your vendors possibly to see how much you're buying from each vendor. So forth. So again, here in the main menu, reports, and scroll down, you want accounts payable reports, vendors and payables, and then there's another drop-down menu, the report that you want. So you could see an aging. You know, how old are some of the things you need to pay? Did you not pay something that's old? And again, a summary and a detail report, vendor balance. Let's say vendor balance. Now, we don't have any balances, so of course, nothing is going to be here. But if you had balances, you would see the list of all your balances and so forth. And the last thing I want to show you in QuickBooks, when you're submitting your reports, and that's what you'll submit for a grade every week, in your assignment, there'll be certain reports that you'll submit for Christina Reyna, and also you're going to do a case study that's Lynn's Music Studio. So each week you'll do different things with both of these companies. And you'll submit reports for both of them, and you'll be graded on Lynn's Music Studio. But we'll get to that when we get to Blackboard. But I do want to show you here what you're going to do on your reports is export to Excel. And you'll see it here, creating a new worksheet. And then you'll export it to Excel. And that's what you'll submit for grading. And I'll show you now where we go to Excel, go to Blackboard. One more thing before we leave QuickBooks. As you're going through the chapter, and the way that you do the homework is just go page by page through the chapter, just like we did today, but doing the different things. On Chapter 2, well, in every chapter, but in Chapter 2, it's on page 63 and 64, there's a chapter review. And I find it's really helpful because it goes through step by step each of the processes that we talked about today. Open this, do that. So if you ever forget, like, okay, what do I need to add here or there? These chapter reviews are, I think, really, really helpful. Okay, so now I'm back. Do we put our actual emails in? No, when you're setting up, you don't need to. You can just put in what's in the book. And let's go and take a look at Blackboard. Okay, so we went over all the goals in QuickBooks. The thing I want to show you that's the most important, as you know how they're set up, here's a summary of all of your assignments this week. And we're going to go into those. Going forward, the assignments every week will remain pretty similar to these. So we may not go over, in futures, we may not go over them in such detail. So there's two things with the assignments. You're going to go into Cirrus, which is this, and check your assignment. If there's errors, correct the errors in QuickBooks. Don't correct the errors in your reports. If you correct the errors in the reports, first of all, you won't get credit for the work. Second of all, it'll mess you up going forward because your books are wrong. Just like if you envision doing this for a company and you're giving reports to your boss and you see an error, you wouldn't scratch it out and write the correct number. You'd go back in and correct it at the transaction level. Did you enter a bill incorrectly? Is the amount wrong? Did you transpose a number? And we all do all of these things. So this new step, having Cirrus help you, is great. But make sure, I don't know how to emphasize enough, that you go back in and you correct it in the transaction. Then once they're all corrected, then you're going to give it to me to grade. You're going to submit it in Blackboard. The first thing you should do as you're working through this week's work, Ms. Schuster has a nice, concise video. It took me almost an hour to talk about all of this. She does it in far fewer minutes, and she's much more concise than I am. So read hers. Here is the watch and learn lesson. Somebody asked me about Cirrus, things to do in Cirrus. This is one of those. You did it in chapter 1. You watched and you learned from the video and did a short quiz. Do that again in chapter 2. And this, to me, is the most important thing of the entire chapter 2, of that, all of the work that you do. This you need to watch. And I maybe watch twice. It's a 2-minute video, a 3-minute, it's very short. But this tells you in detail how to export to Excel, like we looked in QuickBooks, how to save Excel and enter it into Cirrus for grading to get it ready to be set up to be submitted for a grade. Somebody asked about backups and restores. You start each week with, call up the correct chapter for the week, not like I did, and start with changing the company name to your name each week. You don't need to do a backup and restore. Here's more information about exporting to Excel. And here's your assignments to be submitted into Blackboard. You're going to submit for Christina Reyna Designs these 4 reports. But Christina Reyna Interior Designs, you have 4 reports that you'll submit. And the case problem, Lynn's Music Studio, these are the 4 that you'll be graded on. There's check figures here that are appropriate for the report. So they're totals, and so you'll know if they're correct. So there's a 2-step process. And again, this goes on to tell you more about the format to submit them in. Basically, you're going to submit one large Excel workbook that'll have 8 sheets in it, 4 of Christina Reyna's and 4 of Lynn's Music Studio. And just a note, which I think all of you probably know, in case you don't have Excel, you have free access to Office 365, which has Excel. Here are the 4 case problems, the 4 reports rather. They call them case problem 2.1, but the 4 reports for Lynn's Music Studio. This is the Cirrus Grader. Let me just open it. And choose file. You've now saved an Excel file on your computer. You'll choose the file, submit, and it'll come back to you showing what areas you need to correct. So that's great. So of course, again, go back into QuickBooks. If it tells you an amount is wrong, go in and correct that amount. Go in, whatever you need to do. Here's another Cirrus assignment for this week is the exam. So you'll take this and submit it. The exam, the watch and learn in Cirrus they'll be every week, pretty much every week going forward. Very important information about the errors and some common errors that you might make. And once you said, hopefully you will run everything through Cirrus, you'll find your errors, you'll correct your errors, and then when you submit this assignment to Blackboard, there will be no errors, you'll get 100 and you'll move on to the next week. However, we all know that, especially dealing with numbers, we can always miss something. And so when I look at it, I will send it back to you. If it's not correct, I'll send it back to you. It'll be a 0, but don't freak out. It'll be a 0, but I will tell you such and such looks wrong. Go back and check this or that. I won't give you the answer, but I'll direct you in the way in where you need to look to fix it. So again, you'll go back into QuickBooks, go back into the transactions, whether it's changing an amount of a bill, whether it's could even be misspelling of the name of a company, could be anything. So you'll go back and you'll change whatever it is, you'll run new reports, and you'll resubmit the reports. So it sounds daunting now, and I found in classes in chapter 2 and 3, it does sound very daunting. But once you get to chapter 4 and beyond, it's a piece of cake. You'll be getting hundreds every week. You know, here are some common errors down here. And if you have the wrong date range, you're going to have the wrong report. If the date is as of January 31st and or through January 31st, you're going to get two different answers. So, you know, you have to make sure you have the right date range. In QuickBooks, the date that they have you use is in 2022. Make sure that that's the date you're using, not 2021. It'll give you wrong reports. Those kind of little mistakes that we all make are very common. So before you send them in, go back and check all of those. So now, any questions on the assignments in Blackboard? And of course, you click on assignments here to get to where the Dropbox for Blackboard. And it tells you again what reports you need and what information again. Make sure that you have everything labeled properly. So I know what you're submitting.
Is there a particular order we should do it in? Like, should we do the work from the book first and then go and do the Cirrus uploads or the stuff, or it doesn't really matter which one we start with?
I would go through the textbook,
First?
do everything in QuickBooks first.
Okay.
The one thing I would suggest that you do before that, the first thing to do is to read the how to submit. Watch the little how to submit video.
Okay.
Because then when you're in QuickBooks, you'll download to Excel correctly.
Oh, okay.
And you'll find what works for you, you know. You may want to do the watch and learn video first and then go into QuickBooks. Obviously, the exam and sending in the data, sending in the reports has to be after, or it doesn't have to be, but sending in the reports has to be after. Now, someone asked, you can also, it's not a question, you can also check the recorded version when she's finished, which is true. Yeah, so you can go through and look at the recording. If for whatever reason, like your screen froze this time and, you know, those kinds of things, or even when you go, if you're like me, or like I was when I was in college, this isn't due till Tuesday, so it's probably maybe Sunday or Monday I'm going to do this work. You can always go back to the recording and look at it. Not that I'm promoting doing it at the last minute, I just know how I am.
There's no discussion.
And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I normally get online in the afternoon, so if you email me, I will respond within 24 hours, but it will usually be in the afternoon. So if you email me at night, you'll see it the next afternoon. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending, and I'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice week.
You too.